Hello folks, I hope that you're having just a great and happy day today, keeping yourself safe in our COVID world. Today I want to take a look at Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is a science fiction dystopian novel and post-apocalyptic novel, if you will, written in the early to mid-90s. It was nominated for a Nebula Award. I picked up 3 authors from the Dark Matter collection that I've already talked about for you previously. I reviewed this for you, and this was something that I've looked at and been sort of taking a deep dive into sort of black writers and speculative fiction from this. And there were 3 writers that I liked enough to follow their stuff from one page to the next. Octavia E. Butler, who wrote my second favorite story in that novel, who was the second person to win a Hugo Award and the first black woman to win a Hugo Award and the second black person to win a Hugo Award. She won them in back-to-back years in the early to mid-80s for science fiction stories. I believe it was in 84 and 85, although it could be off on that by 1 year up or down. She also was nominated and for a number of books. This novel, Parable of the Sower, is nominated for a Hugo Nebula Award. This novel that I'm currently reading, I'm about that way through it. You can see my bookmarks are dollars, but I'm on page 322 of 407, so I'm almost done with this one. Finish this up today. This one, Parable of the Talents, which is its sequel, is actually won a Nebula Award for best science fiction novel. So this is a series that's been heavily awarded, both the first one and the second one. A lot of fans of the series talk about how the second one is better than the first. And I haven't finished it yet, but so far I like the first one better than the second one, actually. I do enjoy it better. So again, what's going to happen is it envisions, if you will, a future in the 20s. And this was written in the 90s, in the early to mid 90s. And it was written with an eye towards what would the world look like after a number of sort of sociological and other issues like climate issues and so forth all happened at the same time. Because one of our greatest environmental issues right now isn't the climate; it's overpopulation. So what if that overpopulation issue happened at about the same time as some of our sociological issues of people being left impoverished and so forth and hungry in America, even though we've got plenty of food to go around, at the same time as climate change is hitting too. And so she sees these 3 separate sort of things, sociological, population, and climate change as happening at roughly the same time in the 2020s. So this is a post-apocalyptic dystopian work that shows what society is like after these things have started to happen. And you're going to be following this young girl who's the son of a pastor in this middle-class, walled-off community that's in the middle of Robledo, which is about 20 miles from LA, and is one of the suburbs thereof. It's set after you've started to have raids, gangs, war, prostitution, theft, scavenging, those sorts of things have started to happen. Drug dealing, prostitution, capturing people and selling them into prostitution, those sorts of things. And so those sorts of things have started to happen already, although they're not happening that much. But one of the things that our main character, who starts out as a girl, she's going to be one of the first people to see that this is getting worse and worse and worse, and eventually they're going to not be able to defend their home anymore. So they need to be ready to go. And she's going to be the voice of that in the community. She's also going to be somebody who starts to have her own sets of religious beliefs that are partly from what her father told her and what the Bible says, but also from other things that she reads. And so she's going to start to observe truths in the world that she starts to put down in the writings that she does every day as a number of verses. And so what we are actually doing is we're actually reading from the first book that is published as scripture in this religion. So you're reading this as, that's sort of the framing network of this. So you'll know that this survives long enough to become a religion. And it's called Earthseed Books of the Living. So the first chapter is going to be called Earthseed the Books of the Living. And every single chapter after that is going to be called that. And so you're going to know that you're reading actually sections from the text of this book called the Books of the Living, which is the sort of first book of the Earthseed faith, which this person will be the creator of. And so you'll be following along that too. And so she believes in a number of things. She's what they call a sharer. There is a drug that's developed in the 90s that is used. It helps Alzheimer's patients so well that it actually helps other people too. Think faster, learn faster, adapt to things faster. So it's taken by other people too, but there is one. But it has side effects for people that don't have Alzheimer's, and one of those side effects is that your child, if you had this very popular drug, a child that's born of somebody who has this drug, may have something called sharing. And what that does is that it's basically a hypersensitivity to empathy. And if another person is showing signs of pain, you will feel that pain too. So if you punch somebody, you'll feel that punch just as if you'd been punched yourself. You will feel that pain yourself, but you'll also feel their pleasure yourself too, as they feel pleasure. So you'll feel both the world's pleasure and the world's pain, literally. And she was born of her father and his first wife. She dies in childbirth, and so he'll remarry somebody else with their own children in the local community of Robledo. But you'll follow her along and her journey as a sharer in this world. And sharing can be inherited. It seems like it's a dominant trait, like somebody who has sharing. Two people with sharing will have children with sharing, but people without sharing, somebody who has one half of it, each of their children may have it or not have it at about a roughly 50-50 rate. It seems like from me as a reader. And so what's happening in this world? And this book is basically divided into two parts. The first part of this book is basically what's happening in the world building, their life in the society, how they are changing, how they are growing in the society of Robledo, and then moving on to the wandering of the world, so you can kind of see what's happening in the world outside of the thing of Robledo, and so forth, and that sort of a journey. A lot of post-apocalyptic works will flip that. They'll do the journey first, after the big... So for example, Earth Abides does it in that order. Earth Abides was written in the 50s. It has a disease that hits, and you follow, and your main character as a scientist, he'll do a tour of America first to see how things are living, how many people have survived, what life is like in our post-apocalyptic world first, and then he'll set up his colony second. This reverses that order, but it still has both parts that are very typical for a post-apocalyptic sort of a work. But in this case, you're just going to reverse them. You'll start off in this community, and then you'll follow our main character as she leaves the community and journeys out in order to sow her earth seed, and then she'll follow it out. So we'll follow her as she journeys around the world, and we'll see what the world is like and what's happening and so forth. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of things that happen in it. It's very powerful. Octavia E. Butler's writing style looks to me, from the very first page, I was like, I feel like she's a Toni Morrison writing science fiction. This book reminds me very much so of Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. So if you're familiar with Toni Morrison's works, or Song of Solomon in particular, and then you go and read this work, I'm sure you'll see where I'm coming from. Her writing style feels very much like it feels to me like, what if Toni Morrison wrote sci-fi? What would it be like? And this book feels like a Toni Morrison sci-fi. So if that's something that appeals to you, you're going to love it. Again, it was on the short list for a Nebula Award, but didn't win. But it's sequel, Parable of the Sower. Parable of the Talents, rather. I'm currently finishing up right now, and I will do that review for you. My goal is to give this to you, and then give you the follow-up Parable the next week. So I'm going to be giving you this on Tuesday, and then the follow-up Parable of the Talents, which won the Nebula Award in '98 for Best Novel, is going to be next Tuesday. So I'll give you a week to check this out, and that's a good segue. Let me know what you think about this. I'll give you a link in the below to check it out on Amazon or something like that if you're interested in reading it. It does have a lot of very good things written. It's incredibly well written and incredibly well done. It's worth your time, trust me. I knocked it out in 2 days. It doesn't take that long to read. It's like, this was about 100 pages shorter than Parable of the Talents. It's follow-up, and it's only 327 pages long. So it's pretty short. And there you are. It's Parable of the Sower. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Have you read it? Have you read anything else by Octavia Butler? What'd you think of her as a writer? Do you agree with me that she's this really talented and gifted writer who won the Hugo Award who's a major sort of writer in the 80s and the 90s, and won many Nebula Awards too. Do you agree with my sort of take on her, or on this book as sort of a Toni Morrison-esque book, particularly Song of Solomon? Do you like it as a post-apocalyptic work? Do you like it as a dystopian work? Do you like it from other angles? Octavia Butler said that she tended to have three sorts of fans that followed her around from book to book to book: science fiction fans, feminists, because most of her characters were female, and black writers. So she didn't have all three, and I can see why all three of those would like this story. The character's feminist, she's black, and well, she's not feminist. The idea of feminism is something that would exist in a post-apocalyptic world. She's a woman, and she's a strong woman, she looks kind of like a man. So she's probably very much of that sort of thing. And so I can understand why feminists would like this. I can understand why black people would write this. Again, they're seeing a black person as a character, and that race is a part of the story. And finally, I can see why a science fiction fan like me would like it too. Even a white guy who would like it too. A white guy who's conservative would like it too, because it's a great science fiction. It's so well written and so well done, and it has a lot to speak about. It has a sort of a timeless feel to it, like a Toni Morrison novel, and it's so well done for you. There's Octavia E. Butler for you. Again, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you like this. There's going to be so many more of these to follow. And finally, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and watching my video. We all have so many things going on in our lives, so the fact that you spent this time with me is so humbling, and I really do appreciate that. Thanks again, and have a good one.